Hi everyone, Titus here for part 6 of our Asteroids mini-series, and in this video, we'll tackle setting up our game manager, which will handle scoring, lives, and spawning. Let's not waste any time and jump right into it. Okay, I'm going to jump over to the blueprints folder. We're going to create a new blueprint. We'll choose class. We're going to expand the all classes, and you can run a search for game mode. And then under game mode based, there is a just game mode. So select that. And then I'm going to title this BP underscore game manager. And we can double click to open this up. And I'll just dock it into our window here. To use your game manager, you'll want to head over to your project settings. And under maps and modes, there's a selected game mode. The default game mode on this one is using the third person because that's the template I picked. Change that to the BP underscore game manager or whatever you called it. But make sure you set the default pawn class to be the BP underscore ship or whatever player pawn you're using. And then we're going to go back into the game manager. And under the event graph, we're not going to be working with tick. But under the begin play, we're going to make a call out to set timer by function name. And now we just need to create a function to actually use this. For this video, I think we'll probably focus on just spawning the asteroids because I kind of want to try to keep these short. So under functions, let's hit the plus sign. And we'll just call this rock spawner. And then under function name, whatever name you give it, just put it there. I want it to run every, say, 2 seconds, and then we'll set it to looping. Alright, and then inside the rock spawner code, we'll kind of work on this a little bit later, but what we want to do is create our variables. So under the variable section, we're going to feed in 4 different spawn locations. So we'll call this rock spawn 1. And since it's the location, it's going to be a vector. And then we'll call this rock spawn 2, rock spawn 3, and rock spawn 4. Once you have those created, you can compile. We can leave them to be 000 because you can there's a few options here. We could hard code them in if you know your values, which for this project you probably would. But I'll show you another way where you can actually feed them in from like a little object in the world, and then you can kind of move that object around and it'll update the location of rock spawn. So maybe that'll be a little bit easier. But let's go into the level. Let's delete these asteroids. And we're going to go into the add menu, and you can search for target point. And then for this target point, I'm going to call this maybe spawn 1. And then what you can do is just hold Alt, and then you can just drag off and create 4 spawns. I'm actually going to come to top view to kind of make this a little bit easier. So essentially what I want to do is I basically want to place 1 in this quadrant, and I want to place rock 2 in this quadrant, and rock 3 in this quadrant, and maybe rock 4 in this quadrant. Make like a little square, but outside of the player's view. And there's a few ways to do the asteroid spawning. Like originally I was going to just spawn them kind of inside the cone and have them wait and then kind of move randomly. That'll present some challenges. You can certainly go that route, but I think what I'm going to do for this project or this prototype is I'll spawn them outside the view and I'll just throw them at the player, and then I'll just give them a lifetime. So if the player doesn't shoot them, they'll die after a set amount of time. So for some values, if you remember, our view was like 2000 by 2000. So I'm going to set the location for this one to be -3000, and then -3000, and then the Z is going to be 0. I can't see it, but okay. And then for this one, it's going to be 3,000, negative 3,000, and 0. And then this one, I'll do negative 3,000, and then 3,000, and then 0. And this one's going to be 3,000, 3,000, and 0. Let me go back to perspective mode here. So they should be like far enough away where you can kind of see them in the edges of the map there, which is good. That's kind of what we want. So now what we can do is we have to basically capture these locations. And an easy way to do that is we can just use the level blueprint. So we can come up here and go to open level blueprint. And then we won't be working with tick, so we can get rid of that. Under the begin play, we can do a simple cast to our game manager. So BP game manager. We can come off the object pin into get game mode. And then on the game manager, you can right click and just promote it to a variable. That way, in case you need this later in this event graph, we'll have access to it just because it's easier. And then as the game manager, we can do, I think it was what, set rock spawn 1. And then to organize this maybe a little better, we can drag off here, get the game manager, and we can do a set rock spawn 2. And then set rock spawn 3. And set rock spawn 4. Just drag these up like this. And we'll just connect the pins. Now we need to feed in the locations of those target points. So we have 4 target points. So I can come in here, select a point. So let's say we do point 1. Then you can right click and create a reference. And then the thing you need to do is get world location. If you don't see it, uncheck context sensitive, and it'll be under transformation. And then you can plug this into here. It'll make the necessary root component selection for you automatically, so you don't need to worry about it. And then you can just drop this in here. And then what you can do is just duplicate those out 3 more times. Control D. And then we can go back into the level editor, select spawn 2, so it's highlighted. Right click, turn on context sensitive, create a reference to spawn 2. And then just plug that in there. And then we'll do that for spawn 3, highlight it, right click, create a reference, plug it in. And then spawn 4, right click, create a reference, and then plug it in. And this will basically be our basic level code. So all it's doing is when it on the begin play, it's going to do a cast to the game manager. If you didn't know, the game manager spawns first in the game, and then it's followed by the level blueprint, and then all the actors and objects and stuff. So this cast should be successful. It'll pull off the variables from the game manager, and then we'll just get the value of these level objects inside. Like I said, if you didn't want to do this, I'm gonna make sure to plug these in. You could hard code the values as well, but if you wanted to adjust the values, then you're messing with, hard coding values all the time. You may not know where to go. It's easier just to have an object in the map that you can, just move around in the gizmos, and then it'll automatically feed it. So this might be a easier solution for moving things later on, I guess. All right, but now that we have that set up, we can actually come back into the game manager and begin working on our code for the rock spawner. We're going to need another variable. We're going to call this switch, and it's going to be just a simple integer. And then what we're going to do is we'll hold Alt and drag this in to do a set. And then what we can do is get a random integer in range. And we have 4 locations, so we need 4 values here. So you can do between 0 and 3, because that gives you 0, 1, 2, and 3, which is 4 different values. And then we can say equals. And with that selected, you press Control-D and duplicate that 2 more times and hook up the pins like so. We can say, does it equal 0? Does it equal 1? Does it equal 2? And then we can come into 3 branch checks. So you can hold B and just click into the graph 3 times. And for the first condition, you check here. On the false pin, on the second condition, you'll plug that in here. Hook up the false pin like that. And the third condition, we'll check here, and if it's false, then it's obviously going to be the 4th condition. And that'll be how we basically handle this switch statement. And then what the purpose of this function is to spawn the asteroid, right? So you can come off into a spawn actor from class. We can split the transform, so we have access to the location. And remember, we're not going to mess with the scale because we're doing that in the asteroid itself. And then we can just search for the BP asteroid that we created in an earlier video. And then you just plug in your rock spawn like that. And then all you have to do is duplicate that 1, 2, 3 more times. And we'll just hook up these pins here. True into this one, and false into this one. This is going to be spawn 4. This will be spawn 3. And this will be spawn 2. So nothing too fancy with this function. It's pretty straightforward. If we come back into the event graph, we're running this function every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, it's going to come here. It's going to get a random value between 0 and 3. Whatever value that is, it's going to spawn a rock at one of these 4 locations. That's all it's doing. Alright, so with that set, we can actually go into our asteroid code. And we're going to be splitting up some of these functions here. So before we were having the rocks kind of flip between the screens. So we're going to abandon that, so we can just delete the tick code completely. We don't need it. And instead, we're going to basically just hurl rocks at the player. And if it misses the player, it'll destroy after some time. So we're going to need 3 functions here, or 3 events. So custom event, we'll do the first one as rotate. And the next custom event, we're going to do attack. And the third custom event, we're going to do death. Okay, so the rotate code should be pretty straightforward. We kind of already made that before. So we can, on our begin play, we were getting a random float, and then we're setting that into our rotation rate, which is updating our rotating movement script. So we can just move that up here. And we're basically just doing that so it's kind of like organized and out of the way. So nothing too fancy there. And we can just press C, comment that out, rotate rock randomly. And then we're going to delete this code here. And we're going to grab this impulse. And we're going to move that up into the attack section here. So on the begin play, what we need to do is we need to cast to BP ship. And then from the object pin, you can say get player pawn. Player 0 is player 1. And then if that's true, we can say go ahead and just rotate, which we'll call this function up here, and randomly rotate it. Then we want to actually come into a branch check. And then if the branch check is true, we will delay, let's just say 2 seconds. And this is probably just optional, but I'll leave it in. And then we're going to call attack. And then make sure this is working. Let's come into a debug print string, and we'll just name that attack. After we're called attack, we want to call death. And then on the false condition, we simply want to call a debug string. I'm going to title this one ouch. I'll explain that in a minute. And then after that, I also want to call death. So the rock is dying no matter what, basically. Now to handle the condition check. So basically what we're saying is, like, okay, when you're created, just go ahead and rotate, because you're going to do that no matter what. But depending on one of two scenarios, you're either going to attack or you're not. So what controls that? If the player shoots the rock, we don't want to run the attack code, which is basically what hurls the rock at the player, right? When the player shoots it, it should just split off and just keep its momentum or whatever it's doing when it got shot, which is why we're splitting this into a conditional check that'll actually print ouch, because ouch will basically trigger when you shoot the rock to make sure that's working. The condition to do that, we can do a node called, I mean, there's a few ways to do it, but get distance to, and this will basically calculate a float value between 2 points. So as the ship, we can plug that into the other actor, and as the target, we can leave as the asteroid, which is itself. So basically it's going to say, when you spawn in the world, figure out the distance between you and the ship, and if that value is greater, and remember the screen is like 2000, and you can dial this in as precise as you want it to be, but just for this prototype, 2000, that means you obviously spawned outside the player's view. So if that evaluates to true, then you likely spawned out in the edges here. And then we want to hurl you at the player. And if you didn't, if you're less than 2000, you likely spawned within the player's purview, which means the player probably shot your parent rock, and then you got lasered, basically. So we don't want you to throw at the player, we just want you to split off. And then, you know, create your two rocks. So what we'll do is we'll just comment this here, and then this is just the begin play. Hopefully that made sense. And we can work on our attack code and our death code. So for the attack code, you could just throw it at the center of the screen too, but you could also get the player's location and constantly throw it at the player, so that might be fun. So we can do cast to BP ship. Same thing, pull off the object, get player pawn. We can't promote to a variable, because if we do, we won't get the updated player's position. So that's why I'm doing it as a fresh cast, by the way. And then I can say get world location. And we have a few components of the ship. I think the collider makes the most sense. And we can just pull these here. We can come into a get unit direction. And then we can get the asteroid right here. And I think I need to move this code up a bit. And then we'll just get world location. Plug that in there. Now the value that comes out here, we want to invert it so we can actually throw it at the player. Otherwise it's going to throw away from the player. So you can just come into a simple multiply. And we only do the X and Y. We don't do the Z. So we'll do -1, and the X and Y. That'll invert it and basically hurl it at the player instead of away from the player. And then off this pin, we can basically use we'll use our force. So we'll get force, and then we'll multiply by our unit direction, and then we'll plug that into our impulse. And then we're adding the impulse as a velocity change, so make sure that's checked on the actual asteroid itself. And this will be on a success cast. Now the other thing you'll want to do is under force we had it originally a value of 10, but because this is a unit direction it's a much smaller value, so I found that bumping this up to like 1,000 is probably going to be where you want to go. Make sure I did that right. That's 1,000. Yep, 1,000 on the X, 1,000 on the Y. And this should complete our attack code. We can call this attack. Don't worry, our death code is very simple. Let's just come into a simple delay. We'll say that delay is starting off 30 seconds, right? Then we'll come into a print string. For a debug, we'll just say death, and then we'll just call destroy actor so we can know that this is working, and then we'll comment this as our death code. Alright, so if we compile and save and see if I did this right, we should see in the top left screen hopefully an attack, so that means it hurled a rock at us, and then we can just get out of the way. Oh, I missed. And those rocks will collide. And then if I shoot the rocks, although you can see my screen is quickly getting flooded here, but we have some rocks being hurled at us now, which is fun. Now if you wanted to take it just another step forward, you notice all the rocks being spawned are big. In our game manager, for the different spawn points, you could have a little bit of fun with the spawn scale. So like we could do a 0.25, 0.25, 0.25. And we could do this one as a 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. And then we'll do this one as a 0.5. Oops. So you have the rocks being spawned at different sizes and at different parts of the world. So there's the attack call. That looks like a big rock, although that one's a small rock over there. Keeps being spawned on that side. So there's another small one. Or I guess that's a medium-sized one. There's a small one right there. There's a big one. So now you have different, basically, rock sizes being spawned and thrown all around. And you can see death is also being called in the top left corner. So some of these rocks are kind of timing out. And then kind of going from there. And then if you wanted to increase the speed, we can come to the event graph, and that's just the timer here. So you set it to maybe run every 1 second. And now this thing's going to get really crazy. some of the rocks are hitting each other. But yeah, there you go. Alright, good people, I think we'll cut the video here to kind of keep it a little bit short. But in the next one, we'll work on creating the HUD so we can leverage the game manager to track lives and score. As always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and see you on the next one.